In the world of cinema, there are movies that just by hearing the name you can feel the drama. But in the world of American politics, just mentioning Donald J. Trump is enough to make political commentators start their cameras. National security experts hold their pens with trembling hands, and Western allies rush to book tickets to Washington. But no, today we are not talking about the Mexican Wall, nor about Stop the Steal, or the tangled lawsuits. Today, we invite you to step into a new movie called Trump and Syria, the surprise sanctions lift deal. Main actor Donald Trump. Filming location Middle East. Production, the White House Studios. And the director must be MBS, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. Yes, you heard right. While the world is still struggling with the war in Ukraine, tensions in the Middle East, and skyrocketing oil prices, the former U.S. president, now back at the White House for the second time, suddenly announced the U.S. will lift sanctions on Syria because it's time to open a new chapter. The title of this new chapter is not yet known, but pundits are suggesting some intriguing titles: Aleppo Memories, Resurgence or Remorse, The Deal of the Century, Assad Oil and Trump, or more simply, Sanction, Cancelled. Trump's announcement took Washington by surprise. NATO allies looked at each other as if they had been left out of the buffet. Israel dropped its teacup, and Russia, sitting cool as if in a movie theater, holding popcorn, whispering, "He really did it, huh?" And in today's video, we will uncover each layer of this political drama. Why did Trump choose this moment to lift sanctions on Syria? Is this a move for peace, or a Trump-style geopolitical deal? And finally, the most important thing, who benefits? And who will pay the price? Prepare your coffee, turn up the volume, because you are about to embark on a political journey no less thrilling than House of Cards. And the main character is the former host of the reality TV show The Apprentice. Let's go. To understand why Trump's announcement to lift sanctions on Syria was so shocking, we need to rewind a bit. Back in the early 2000s, when the internet was slow, and Syria was already being pinned by the US. Yes, you heard right. The first sanctions came from nowhere, but from President George W. Bush in 2004 in an executive order with a long name but short content. Syria supports terrorism. Sanctions are necessary. Since then, the US sanctions machine has been running as smoothly as a supermarket receipt printer. Every time Syria was accused of doing something wrong, the US added a new package of sanctions. Support for Hezbollah? Sanctions. Aid to Iran? Sanctions. Suppression of protests in 2011? Sanctions immediately. Chemical attack? Special sanctions. Upgraded version? After the Syrian civil war broke out in 2011, US policy officially shifted to maximum pressure. The embargo was expanded to include finance, energy, weapons, investment, and even cosmetics imports from Syria. Yes, Damascus skin cream was hit too. The Obama administration not only sanctioned, but also funded some opposition groups. During Trump's first term, although he declared that he didn't want to get bogged down in the Middle East anymore, but the sanctions remained and were increased with a very marketing name, the Caesar Syria Civilian Protection Act, but caused the Syrian economy to be paralyzed to the point that civilians had no electricity. I thought that Biden's time would change, but no. President Biden continued the policy of sanctions to deter and kept Syria in a state of near diplomatic freeze. Every year, the government extended the embargo. Every year, Syrians heard news, but it was still the same old news. A Syrian joked, "We have been sanctioned for so long that my child was born on the list, banned from trading with the US." Of course, the US did not do this for no reason. Accusations of using chemical weapons, repressing civilians, torture, forced disappearances, made the international community unanimously stand on the side of the embargo. Syria became an almost completely isolated country, with only a few trading partners such as Iran, Russia, and to some extent China. So, when Donald Trump suddenly announced, "We will lift the sanctions on Syria to help them rebuild," Washington was like, frozen for 3 seconds, and the Syrian people couldn't believe their ears. They thought it was deepfake AI, but every decision has a reason, and with Trump, there is always a logic. The question is it strategic logic, or is it the logic of a negotiator who always thinks nothing is impossible, including making peace with Assad? Let's move on to the next part to decode. Ladies and gentlemen, Donald Trump is not a traditional politician. He does not believe in the old rules of American diplomacy. If Washington policy circles have a 500-page handbook, Trump only holds a note with the bold words, "Where is the money? Who benefits? Does the US profit?" So when Trump announced the lifting of all sanctions on Syria, don't think for a moment that he is becoming a humanitarian. No, he is becoming a true political traitor. There are at least 4 reasons behind this unexpected decision, each of which is very Trump-branded. 1. The U.S. economy, oil and reconstruction of Syria under the guise of peace. This decision actually smells of petrol. Syria's oil reserves are not as large as Saudi Arabia's, but they are still enough to make American companies light up if they are given free access after the embargo is lifted. Trump once said, "If we defeat terrorism, why not take the oil as a reward?" And now it seems he is turning that saying into policy. In addition to oil, Syria is a ruined but potential land. The lifting of the embargo opens up the opportunity for billions of dollars in infrastructure investment, a huge pie that China and Iran are eyeing. Trump clearly does not want to let this profit fall into the hands of others. 2. Internal politics. Shocked to get the focus amid dozens of lawsuits, investigations, and a series of criticisms from Congress, Trump needed a media bomb to change public opinion. And that bomb was a surprise announcement about Syria. Like filming The Apprentice, Trump just fired the sanctions with the words, "You're fired." Bold, unexpected, and controversial actions. That's the style that makes the media unable to take their eyes off him. And Trump knows how to take the airwaves. 3. Courtesy to Russia, but not in the way you think. Some analysts believe Trump is sending a soft signal to Russia, the country that supports the Assad regime. Lifting sanctions on Syria could be an indirect gift to the Kremlin. But Trump is not simply indulging Putin. He is trying to create a bargaining position. I give up Syria, but can you be softer on Ukraine or European gas? Yes, the kind of exchange that would get you banned on eBay. But in international politics, it is still called strategic negotiation. 4. Projecting the world pacer image. Before the election, Trump is running for his second term in office, after returning to the White House. And he knows that the American people are tired of war, sanctions, and foreign intervention. By announcing the lifting of sanctions on Syria, Trump is sending a message. I am the only one who can do what Washington dares not do: free the world from sanctions and war. It is unclear whether he will bring peace to both Ukraine and Gaza, but at least he has taken Assad off the blacklist, at least in the eyes of the US. In short, Trump did not simply let go of Syria out of compassion. This was a carefully calculated move, combining economic interests, personal image, and business-like foreign policy tactics. And for Trump, the world is not a strategic chessboard, but a global political market, where whoever bargains best wins. But is this move really effective? How will the world react? And what awaits the US in the future when it shakes hands with the Assad regime? When Donald Trump announced the lifting of all sanctions on Syria, the world reacted as if it had just received news that Beyoncé had entered politics. Yes, shocked, bewildered, and no one knew whether it was true or not. The European Union, especially Germany and France, had been imposing sanctions on Syria almost in parallel with the US for 10 years. And now, as Washington pulls the plug on the embargo campaign, Brussels was like someone who had just finished singing karaoke and had the microphone cut off. The French foreign minister said, "The US decision is one-sided and lacks consultation." Roughly translated, Trump is playing by himself again. Some European officials worry that the US reconciliation with Syria will cause other Middle Eastern countries, which have been reluctant to Assad, to start thinking again. The big question in the EU now is, do we continue to sanction Syria while our American friends are opening an investment showroom in Damascus? NATO, which once unanimously condemned Assad, is now silent, not because they agree, but because they have not yet written a joint statement. "We thought Trump was just testing the microphone," a NATO official said, off the record. Some member states, such as Turkey and Italy, are quietly pleased that they already had underground economic channels with Syria. Now they can do business openly. Israel has good reason to lose sleep over this decision. Assad, though not directly at war with Tel Aviv, is a close friend of Iran and Hezbollah, and lifting sanctions could help Syria regain its military capabilities. So when Trump said that Syria is changing positively and needs help rebuilding, an Israeli general responded with 4 words: "It's an Iranian dream." And the Mossad? They immediately updated the map of Syria, switching from gray to blinking red. For Russia and Iran, Syria's 2 closest allies, Trump's announcement was a godsend. Even though no one invited them, Moscow celebrated as if they had just won the World Cup. The Kremlin called Trump's decision a pragmatic move, and Russian media celebrated like it was a holiday. Iran could not hide its joy either. Now the flow of aid to Syria would be less choked off. And if the West eased up, Iran could continue to expand its corridor of influence from Tehran to Beirut. China has not said much, but it has certainly listened. It has been involved in several small humanitarian and reconstruction projects in Syria. Now that the US sanctions have been lifted, Beijing could step in with a Syrian version of the Belt and Road Initiative. And if Trump decides to bring US companies into Syria, China will politely wait outside the door, then come in later with cheaper prices and more cash. In short, the world's reactions can be divided into 3 groups. 1. Stunned, like Europe. 2. Worried, like Israel. 3. Fireworks, like Russia and Iran. And as usual, Trump, alone, turned the global order into a domino board, where each country that falls will cause shockwaves in unexpected places. But all those reactions are just superficial. The real question is, will lifting sanctions really help Syria? Or is this just a political game that leaves ordinary people behind? President Trump may have signed a bold decision, but now we have to answer the most important question. What will the Syrian people gain from this move? And will it come at a cost? The first thing Syria will be able to sniff after decades of sanctions is cash, namely, investment flows, reconstruction aid, and the possibility of a partial revival of its oil and gas industry. But don't imagine Damascus shining like Dubai. In fact, Syria needs $400 billion to rebuild. Trump's decision only opens a small side door, not the main gate. In addition, when Western companies can do business again, the Assad regime will have more money to pay salaries, restore infrastructure, and, God willing, reduce gas prices. This is the hardest part. Will the Syrian people, already suffering millions of tons of bombs, triple-digit inflation, and rolling blackouts, benefit from the lifting of the sanctions? The answer is probably a little. If foreign investment comes, some people might have jobs. If aid is delivered transparently, there might be more food and medicine. But sorry, this is Syria, where sometimes a ton of rice has to go through 5 checkpoints. And the best part, doesn't reach the people. Unquestionably, Assad is the one who rejoices in his heart the most, not only because of oil revenue or reconstruction, but because Trump's decision has great political significance. Syria is no longer a pariah state. Observers even liken this action to a VIP ticket that brings Mr. Assad back to the international dance floor, where he was previously kicked out for stepping on too many people's toes. And while the victims of war have not yet received justice, the government has more room to repaint the country's image in front of the world. Lifting sanctions can be a double-edged sword. When money pours in without transparency, corruption can flourish. As the history of the Middle East has shown, more money, more budgetary black holes. And more worryingly, if armed groups or local governments seize the resources, the risk of Syria fragmenting increases. The hot war may be over, but the Cold War between factions may return, this time for money. Worst case scenario, Syria becomes a Middle Easternized version of a country with a stable GDP, but widespread injustice, and no one dares to name it. It is important to emphasize, Syrians are not waiting for a Trump or a Biden to live well. They need a chance, not a promise. And the big question is the money pouring into Syria going down to the basements where people are sheltering, or just stopping at the top floors of government buildings? Trump's decision could be a turning point, or just a PR stunt. It all depends on who controls the resources, and whether the international community dares to demand transparency. So there we have it, a shocking decision, a chaotic chain of reactions, and an uncertain future. But you know what? In this geopolitical game, there may be one piece that has been overlooked: the United States itself. Will lifting sanctions on Syria bring anything to Washington, or is it just Trump's shock for points move? China has not said much, but it has certainly listened. It has been involved in several small humanitarian and reconstruction projects in Syria. Now that the US sanctions have been lifted, Beijing could step in with a Syrian version of the Belt and Road Initiative. And if Trump decides to bring US companies into Syria, China will politely wait outside the door, then come in later with cheaper prices and more cash. In short, the world's reactions can be divided into three groups. 1. Stunned, like Europe. 2. Worried, like Israel. 3. Fireworks, like Russia and Iran. And as usual, Trump, alone, turned the global order into a domino board, where each country that falls will cause shockwaves in unexpected places. But all those reactions are just superficial. The real question is, will lifting sanctions really help Syria? Or is this just a political game that leaves ordinary people behind? For Trump, diplomacy is a business deal, and lifting sanctions on Syria could pave the way for US corporations to jump in to rebuild billions of dollars in oil, infrastructure, and logistics contracts. A message to the Middle East: want to develop? Deal with the US. There are even rumors that an American real estate company has been quietly preparing a Trump Tower, Damascus project. If true, it's true. Sanctions are long, but money is forever. But nothing is free. Lifting sanctions on Syria raises a painful question. Is the US still a human rights defender? For years, sanctions have symbolized the West's moral stance on war crimes. Now, if they are lifted without any commitment to reform from the Assad regime, is the US selling itself short? This is not just a business deal. It is a statement. We will join hands if it is beneficial, and this sets a dangerous precedent for other countries. Lifting sanctions on Syria is not simply deleting a document. It is an act of reshaping an entire foreign policy philosophy. Trump, as always, made an unexpected move, and it left a ripple effect on the world chessboard. The question is, if this is a political drama, are we at the climax or just the trailer? What do you think? Is Trump really a master? Or is he playing a dangerous game? Can Syria be rebuilt? Or will it become a testbed for new American policies? Comment below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any political analysis, both serious and funny. See you in the next video.